I'ma keep it going, nigga, when I switch sides. Hustle is a straight to my mind, what's your time? Don't fuck it up, I ain't never gonna let you slide. That's right, boy, I will be a star in the sky. Nigga, show up, I'm still sober. I'm dashing sober, I've been dropping cola. They can know it's my time, they won't love so soft.
Oh, my nigga in my hood, shooting go, yeah.
The subject of death is often quite complicated to discuss with some people, and unsurprisingly, this is also the case with the inhabitants of Teamwide. In this way, Hutao comes across as an eccentric young woman who finds her happiness in death. So of course, said like that, she could pass for a psychopath, but the reality is that her behavior and personality are the result of a youth far from peaceful, marked by mourning and solitude. Consequently, Hutao is one of the rare people who, despite her young age, has a very particular relationship with death, expressing neither contempt nor fear towards this obligatory end of life. After all, death is inevitable. It is an integral part of the cycle of life, so one might as well accept it when it shows up. Today, we are going to look at the life philosophy of Hutao, the 77th director of the Wangsheng Funeral Parlor in Liyue, who, according to my own vision of things, has understood how to live her own life with perfect mental serenity. To be honest, the young Hutao was not always like this. What I mean by that is that, like most people who populate this planet, she was afraid of death and what it represented. If we set aside all philosophical and religious beliefs, death represents the end of life, so it's not surprising that it's scary. Nothing is more precious than the fact of being alive, so nothing seems more serious than being faced with the end of one's own life or that of others. And Hutao experienced this well, because during her youth, she lost the human being who was dearest to her, her grandfather. She was only 13 years old at the time, and her grandfather represented everything to her role model, her ideal, her protection. It's difficult to imagine what she must have felt seeing him pass away, leaving behind a lost little girl who would have to take over the family business. Because, precisely, Grandfather Hu was the 75th director of the funeral parlor. Hutao had to take up the torch upon her grandfather's death, making her the 77th director. So it's a bit strange because we go from 75th to 77th, and I haven't found any trace of the 76th director. Logically, the son or daughter of Grandfather Hu should have been the 76th, but this person is mentioned nowhere. Based on what Zhongli says about the funeral parlor being in operation for 77 generations, it is possible that the director's number only represents the generation number. Thus, in passing from the grandfather to the granddaughter, a generation was skipped, making Hutao, indeed, the director of the 77th generation. This is currently my only explanation. Anyway, at only 13 years old, she had to manage all the affairs of the Hu family. This means she had to organize clients' funerals to continue developing the company's services, to keep the organization going. Imagine being a business owner with no one to help you when you're only 13 years old. It seems unthinkable, but yet Hutao did it. The loss of her grandfather made the character grow and adopt a very particular vision of death itself, a vision that, in the end, was shared by her ancestors and transmitted from generation to generation. When little Tao's grandfather passed away, it was she who had to organize everything for his funeral. She therefore made sure to respect the ceremony as much as possible to grant the necessary respect to her late grandfather. Of course, all of this had to be done in immense grief that was difficult to hide. Before dying, her grandfather had bequeathed her his hat. It is called the Hat of Universal Peace. This hat is now considered by the young woman to be a magical hat, capable of judging good and evil. Of course, that's nonsense, but given the emotional weight it represents, I imagine we can let her say what she wants. Since then, her hat has accompanied her wherever she goes, bringing peace and eternal rest, in the same way that death could soothe the torments of the living. If there's one thing she learned from her ancestors, it is that death represents appeasement. All the evils that people suffer during their lives are erased in death. Seeing it this way, we're not going to start wishing for someone's death, let's not be that bad, but rather let's consider that it can represent a certain liberation when each stage of life has been overcome. Hutao sees it a bit like a workday. A complicated day, full of twists and turns, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But whatever happens, once the day is over, it feels good to rest by lying down in one's bed. Nothing very scary about that, is there? Well, even if that's her way of seeing things, which has been passed down from generation to generation, she had to experience grief to really understand what it meant. In some beliefs, there's a place one goes to after death, a sort of intermediate stage that occurs after the death of the physical body but before the appeasement of the soul. In Genshin, we call this stage the border. It's not really a purgatory because the souls are not judged there, but it is the place through which every soul must pass to have access to the other world. Precisely in the hope of seeing her grandfather one last time, Hutao ventured to Wu Wang Slope to reach the famous border between life and death. This journey was absolutely not prepared, as she left hastily 10 days after her grandfather's funeral with just a small bag and a few provisions. Upon arriving there, she was able to meet lost souls who were about to cross the border. Some of them were not even ready to do so and ended up staying indefinitely in this pseudo-purgatory. Hutao then spent a lot of time at the border, hoping to cross paths with her grandfather's soul. One day, 2 days, 3 days, the provisions were disappearing, but still nothing. The lost souls just looked at her as if to judge her. It was then that the soul of an old woman appeared to chat with the young Tao. She explained to her that her journey was pointless, and for a very specific reason. Only souls still feeling regret towards the mortal world come to linger at the border. Grandfather Hu had lived his life to the fullest, and even on his deathbed, he never felt any regret about the way he lived his life. He often said, "Live in life, die in death. Follow your heart, do what you can." This simple phrase just means that one should focus on what is happening in the present moment. When one is alive, one must concentrate on the simple fact of being still alive and enjoying it to the fullest without thinking about death. And the day death comes, our soul will take care of thinking about what it must do when the time comes. In the end, life is not something complicated. According to the family, you just have to focus on the things you can do. Since death is inevitable, being afraid of it would only make us appreciate our own life less. This does not mean that one should live in a completely carefree manner, but rather be aware of the fact that some things can be changed and others cannot. What cannot be changed should not occupy mental space during a day. And we must not forget that it is death that gives meaning to life. It is only because our time is limited that we give it importance. Such was the subtlety of the words of Hutao's grandfather. The young girl, having understood this, at that precise moment, decided to go home with a light heart. Because even if she hadn't been able to see her grandfather again, and he was gone for good, she had finally understood what the word live really meant. And from now on, she could honor this family vision. This philosophical realization earned her the obtaining of her pyro vision, as if the gods had rewarded her for having understood the true meaning of life. "13 years old is the age at which Hutao radically changed. She succeeded her grandfather, she developed the family business, she understood how to live her own life, and she received a pyro vision. We can consider that the circle is complete. Several millennia ago, the Hu family was composed only of doctors, because during the Archon War, the carcasses of dead gods plagued the lands of Liyue. To suppress this famous plague, Morax called upon the Yaksha Guardians, but some humans were entrusted with the same mission. A doctor, equipped with the Staff of Homo, was tasked with purifying the plague and darkness of this world. In this way, he was able to rid these lands, at least on his scale, of all its evils, to thus establish peace. The descendants of this doctor established the Wangsheng funeral parlor, so that today, Hutao perpetuates the ancient family customs. Certainly, she may not have great knowledge of medicine, at least clearly not as developed as that of her rival Baiju, but she wants to spread peace and lift the taboo of death. The fact that she obtained a pyrovision is consistent with the practices of her predecessors. In this way, I consider, as said earlier, that the circle is complete for the family. But then, all this took place several years ago, and today, Hutao was no longer as young as she was then. So what is the result of a few years with this new philosophy of life? Well, what we can say is that now Hutao is very eccentric. She doesn't care about social norms, which is why she is often despised by some. Whether it's dropping a rap in the middle of Liyue Harbor during the Lantern Rite Festival, or just having fun scaring those who venture onto Wuong Slope, as long as Hutao is having fun, that's the most important thing. The fact that she gave Chi-Chi a hard time can be seen as a way of having fun, even if in reality it's much more complex than that. So, yes, giving a little zombie a hard time is hilarious, but Hutao's view on the matter is not really something to be taken lightly. For the young woman who has been immersed in the funereal atmosphere since birth, meeting a being stuck between life and death defies all logic. If life is a blessing and death a liberation, a living dead represents a curse. It is to free her from this curse that she spent whole months trying to bury Chi-Chi. Hutao is worried about her. She is sorry for not having been able to help her pass into the afterlife, so she tried at all costs to appease her. All this brought her into conflict with Baiju. On one hand, we have a young woman who wants to accompany souls to the other world for their final rest. And on the other, we have a doctor who is trying to become immortal and who rejects death itself. The two visions can only oppose each other. So when Hutao tried to lift the zombie's curse, Baiju obviously intervened. It was only after understanding that Chi-Chi was satisfied with her life that Hutao apologized for everything she had put her through, deciding to let her live her dead life to the fullest. Of course, Hutao can seem detestable. She can even be so for some. but her eccentricity is synonymous with a joy for life. She doesn't worry about yesterday and doesn't think about tomorrow, because only today matters. If we look beyond just the personality of a fictional character, Hutao's story is a true philosophy dealing with acceptance. We will all one day be confronted with this situation, or it has already been the case for some of us in the past. It may currently be the case for others. No one has the pretension to tell people how to approach things that happen without warning, but some visions can facilitate the most delicate situations. There are an incalculable number of factors to take into account during a lifetime. So why bother with what cannot be avoided? As a great author said, I have nothing to lose per se, since we don't take anything with us. In this way, life can be approached more serenely. When we consider death as the continuity of life, what can really happen to us? And as you can see, guys, we've reached the end of this video. I hope you liked the video. Write down in the comments what you think of Hutao's story and whether you got the character or not. As for me, unfortunately, I haven't gotten her yet, but I'm trying my best to get her because honestly, a character like this with a story like this, I can't possibly miss out on her. So, wish me luck, guys. I know they won't get the support that's worth the effort I put into them, but your support with likes is the only thing that keeps me going. So I hope you support this clip with a like, share the video everywhere, and if you want to see more Genshin stories, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for your support, and goodbye.